No, I don't think Niko choked. However, there are some weaknesses, I think, in Falcon's game plan, especially those around Niko, that Maus did seem to exploit. The main one being that I don't think Niko is a particularly good mid-ancient player, at least so far in his tenure. He was a fantastic B player, cave player, whatever it gets listed as. He's a great player in general, obviously. However, I actually don't really know if it's Niko specifically that is the problem in mid, or if it's just their protocols, because when I look at the way Falcons is playing, I haven't looked at every team, but I've looked at other teams, Maus included, and I feel like Falcons just don't play mid in quite the same way. They don't triple mid nearly as much as I see other teams do. They don't throw as much utility in mid other than this initial. They send Magisk and Niko, they do the molly, they do the flash nade at the same time. They don't have that third player in house throwing a supporting flash. They don't have the run boost teams are doing towards the bottom of mid now to catch the timing. They don't do a lot of things I see other teams do, and that could be part of the reason that Niko is fairly weak on Ancient, because when I look at the stats, when Niko has been playing in Falcons, his CT side Ancient stats, he's like barely above a 1.0 rating, whereas if you look back when he was playing towards B, he was one of the highest rated players I could find actually on CT sides. I don't know if the solution is to switch him over. Maybe Tezes, if he's their main B player, doesn't necessarily want to be playing towards middle. Maybe it just wasn't working out after they tried it, but you know, and maybe to the same extent, I mean, maybe Niko just needs a little bit more practice. They've played this map like 7 or 8 times now. It's not like he's been playing here forever. And to be fair, by the way, they did beat Maus on this map previously in the same tournament. However, it seems like in this case, Maus had a better idea of what they actually wanted to be doing. Falcons do give up mid quite a bit, which is what you're going to need to do if you actually are a team that is fairly light in mid. You have to give it up a decent amount of the time so that your opponents can't just kind of like print round wins by going mid heavy or doing delayed mid plays, those types of things. So they do give up mid a decent amount of the time, but that means that you end up having players committed, because once you get smoked off in Donut, then you have to have a player committed to watching the CT flank as well, and you end up having lighter bomb site holds oftentimes, especially on the B side comparatively. Now, if there's any moment that could have been described as a choke, it might have been this one, where Niko actually gets this long flank around, comes up behind Spinks. That's a kill he gets 9 times out of 10. I don't even say that. 9 times out of 10. That's a kill I think he gets like 95 times out of 100, if not more. He even had... Spinks was on his screen for plenty long enough, and he missed the shot. But that's just the reality. I mean, you're going to miss shots like that once in a while. You're going to let kills go. It's not the end of the world. But here, this is not the run boost I was talking about, by the way. One of the things that Maus does really effectively, they're going to throw flash, bang, 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 bang. And that means, like, generally in this type of situation, if you look at what Niko actually did, Niko gets run boosted, gets up on this ledge. Usually you have this player, he's going to dodge the first flash and then turn back around, but there is really no such opening in which he can be, you know, spotting that smoke walk through while not blind for any reasonable period of time. I'll actually show you what that looks like when Maus are on the CT side, because you can see the way Zershin, I believe it's Zershin, plays it, where he dodges the first flash, turns back around and gets the free kill onto Niko. But in this case, not only Maus have a really strong take, a good idea of how to do that. I don't know if that's in the meta, if that's what a bunch of teams are running or not, but that's a very hard, you know, flash combo to deal with. But also, I'm not sure that Falcons have the greatest counter to it. So we skip the anti-eco, and Falcons are going to play off of middle again. This time around, they have Niko in towards house. They're going to go for a bit of delayed control, so they allow the time for Zershin to get out into that mid cubby, where a lot of the times you'll have a solo player consider getting in situations like this. He mollies it out and then nades out the smoke right afterwards, trying to catch that player falling back. They even had a flash off of Magisk, so it's a really well-coordinated idea to punish teams that are trying to do those sorts of plays when they know, well, you know, based on the utility, Falcons probably isn't in middle. They know that's the reality. Then you try and counter the counter. I think that's relatively effective. In this case, they just don't catch them at the right timing. And to be fair to Falcons, I think Maus do a couple of times just run the right strat at the right moment. Now, there's levels to this, right? It's not an accident that you run a strat at a timing that you expect your opponents to be running a certain other setup. You know, it's not a complete accident, but at the same time, it's a percentage thing, and you can't always be on the right side of the percentages just because you think it's likely, right? In this case, Falcons give give up mid early, but they actually get the control right back. They pivot into a very strong setup, into a solid hold. Niko's in the right position. Dagster gets caught there, and then Magis is going to get caught in the middle of mid. I think he kind of wanted to fall back towards Donut in that situation, but because of that flash, he ends up just getting kind of trapped in towards cutout. He gets caught. Niko can get one, but he's completely committed when he gets that first one. I feel like he could have been a little bit further back maybe and just got one kill and gone, because he strafes out into the open. I don't know, this is reaching over analysis levels, but in any case, Niko gets one. You really need Magis most likely to get one in that situation to have a great chance. However, Kixon in the 1v1 does play it perfectly. The 1v2 picks up one, not only one, but gets Jimfat after time as well, so they tie things up. Problem is, even with the tie up, they don't have a ton of money. You can see they're all under 4,000. They're gonna go for a buy. They're gonna not have full rifles, a couple MP9s, and the thing is that Maus should be relatively aware of this reality, right? They had 2 players alive, 0, and then you win 1 round with time. Maus are going to be aware that the buy isn't great from Falcons, and I actually think it might be intentional. They go for this SMG, they go for the MAC-10 because they know what's the first thing you sacrifice in these rounds. One of the first things you sacrifice is going to be head armor. You're just going to buy body armor. And so I think that's actually just kind of a clever play. That leaves Niko holding back on middle. The options, I think, in this type of situation with those MP9s, you're either going for heavy, like deep control of middle and getting a player up close, or you're most likely playing off of middle and you might be going for places where the MP9s feel a little bit stronger. Sometimes that's in towards cave. Sometimes that's, you know, B ramp pushes can be fairly effective. People like doing those on 4 spies, I think. But here, Niko just spotting in from Donut. Torji's just got the right read on the way Niko is likely to play in that situation. It might be something that Niko does often in these types of like 4 spies or like kind of near full buys. But at the same time, they can also do that. It doesn't need to be a commit, right? They can go for that posturing towards middle. They can listen for the utility. Okay, there's no utility thrown. All right, now we can actually go for that walkout with Torji in middle. And this late into the half, that type of play makes a whole lot of sense. You can try and avoid that if you're Niko. People sit like looking to the side with the smoke out to make it as hard as possible. And that does sometimes make the opper miss, but at the same time, he's either going to hit the shot or he's not, right? It's 50-50. It's 50-50. It's either it's a kill or it's not. But there was Niko getting picked early on that ends up in a round his team loses, but they didn't have the greatest buy. Then again, Falcons are going to go for this aggressive plan mid. Niko has to take that extra time, by the way, to go around the smoke, go around this molly that gets thrown in mid. The run boost I'm talking about, you get run boosted here and you try and get up close in this cubby. You can also, actually, I've heard you can run boost through here and get here as fast as possible. But in any case, Niko throws the molly, then the flash, then swings out. He actually, I think he gets blinded partially by his own flash, but he's getting blinded by the flashes thrown from Maus, regardless of whether or not he half blinds himself. Maus blow out the smoke. They've got really good utility thrown. They've got 3 players there. Falcons have 2, and they're caught in the open, and they just absolutely destroy them. And I think one of the things you have to respect Maus for in this tournament, and Australis as well, actually, but Maus most notably in this game at least, is game planning. I mean, I think Maus came into a lot of games just clearly with better ideas on how to play out against the setups, the styles that their opponents were playing, and consistently found themselves in early half advantages like this. They're up 6-3, they go for this A play, and they just absolutely catch Falcons off guard. Now, you actually have Dagster going in through Donut towards mid, and I thought, can he not hear them? You can actually see he stuttered for a second here. So one of the things, if you look at Na'Vi, Wonderful will do quite often. He sits here, I think it's here, or he might move over slightly. He sits here for like a second and a half quite often, listening for this exact play. And I think either Maus might have like delayed it for half a second, or they're just a little bit late, or Dagster just didn't wait that extra half second because he doesn't hear them. Then they have to go back for this play once they hear the smokes landing. That's my interpretation of this. And Niko just, he's actually there. The smoke lands. I thought he got caught before that smoke landed. However, the smoke did land, and Jimmy just found a really good timing to start spamming through that smoke. And once Niko's dead, they lose that control, right? Because you have a player, if you get a player out on the bomb site, he's just buying a little bit of space, and then it's safe potentially for other teammates to come through behind, or it even just delays your opponents so they don't take the bomb site, plant the bomb. It delays them enough that their smokes come down, and you can actually start picking them off from around the bomb site. Instead, because Niko dies, they can take full control and they're just completely comfortable, and there's really not much chance. Then Niko even getting slowed by that nade, by the way. That nade is nice for damage. It's also nice because it just slows you a little bit, especially because in this situation, he's going to have to run through a molly anyways. So he forces through that molly, and he just doesn't quite find the timing. But that's like the part of the goal of this play. If you're on the T side, you really want to get out before that player can get into that cubby. Like, if he can get next to you there, you're just going to end up dying. I really like the run boost play that a lot of teams are running, Mao's included. They do the exact same thing back to Falcons with they do the run boost, right? And Falcons do a very similar play to what Mao's ran, but they get killed because the player is just there a little bit too quickly. So actually, if you include the fact that Niko got an anti-eco ace in that half, Niko got 1 kill. Some of those rounds, the rounds they won, he was in good position, just didn't end up seeing anyone, right? It's not necessarily his fault, but a lot of the rounds, he went for mid control and he just ended up dying. The thing is, the reason I don't see this necessarily as choking, except for that 1 round against Spinks that he really needed to get, is because I don't really think it was necessarily primarily on Niko the way they lost mid. Okay, nice dink on Kixan. I feel like a lot of what happened in middle is that Mao's just had a good idea the way Falcons were playing it, and Falcons, I don't feel like their mid control is all that strong, right? They run into these Mao's plays. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of exactly how you're supposed to play middle because I don't really know the answer to that perfectly. However, it just, to me, felt like Niko was, and I mean, you could say that that's Niko's fault, right? Because Niko is, people talk about him. I don't think he's leading their CT side, but maybe he is. I know Lige was picked up and led FaZe's CT side. Niko's very vocal. Maybe that's partly, that's how he wants to control mid, and Mao's just found a way to deal with it. Maybe he feels like their mid control is perfect and they just ran into the wrong setups. Whatever. At the end of the day, they got rolled over in mid. It definitely didn't help them win. And on T side, they don't do a whole lot better. I mean, they get some rounds, but they don't do a whole lot better. But I was talking about, I would show you this. So Xerxion's going to get, actually, I thought he got run boost. He's just going to do his own flash play, or his own jump across, which is impressive as hell, by the way. But he gets up, he turns around, dodges the flash, then spins back right at, the timing where he thinks it's going to work out. Jimmy's running in the opposite, looking the opposite direction as well, dodging flashes. They have 3 players there, and I think, I would guess they were also throwing one of these support flashes high to the left, like this one here that a lot of teams throw, that I actually have only seen Falcons throw 1 time, because it requires someone to be back in house most of the time to throw that, although I think someone threw it and then went through the smoke with it. A lot of teams will have someone throw that and then they might pivot back over to A to watch A, or pivot over to B. In any case, Falcons end up down 10-5 rather at the start of the real gun rounds. Of course, the force in mid didn't go their way, but that's just the way it goes sometimes, right? That's just the way the cookie crumbles. Niko gets out mid, gets control with Kixan. They're actually in a reasonable position. They used a bit of utility to take mid. If you look at the top, they have, 2 flashes, 2 smokes, and 2 mollies now. So they don't have perfect utility, but they probably didn't start the game with perfect utility, or the round rather, because it is just, it's a first round buy in this type of situation. But Niko gets himself with a very nice lurk through into Cheetah, gets into a spot they're not at all expecting, and gets himself 2 kills. In fact, I feel like this happened a couple of times. This definitely happened on Nuke as well in this series, where Niko would have 1 bad half, but it would be kind of covered up by a really strong half on the other side, right? I think Nuke, he had a really bad T side and a good CT side, or it might have been both CT side yet again. But regardless, this is the play, one of the plays I was talking about, where you're actually going to have Jimfat. He's going to get run boosted through the molly. They actually mess it up. He doesn't get run boosted correctly, but it does buy you a tiny bit of time. Actually, I'm not sure it did buy him almost any time at all, but they definitely did get into that corner. And when you're looking at the buy coming out of Mao's here, you're probably expecting not the greatest buy of all time. You're expecting that type of MP9 buy. And if you look at what Falcons did, when they were playing with an MP9 buy, they actually gave up middle, which is obviously one of the options. In this case, the other option is that exact play. So I feel like they must have been somewhat ready for that play, but they just got the timing wrong on coming out through that smoke, and Niko wasn't ready for it at all. Niko, he just ends up walking straight through the smoke, straight into him. And I mean, that's the point. I mean, if we saw what Xerxion did, Xerxin walked through the smoke in a similar way, but the point being that Xerxin walked through the smoke a little bit faster. And obviously the molly plus nade from Niko is intended to prevent that exact play, but the run boost through, I think, just kind of dodges that a little bit, even if the run boost doesn't go perfectly. Jimmy just ends up, I don't know if that's like the run boost bought that extra time, or if Niko's a little bit late, or maybe that's just a reality that you have to live with when you look at that type of, with that strategy. Ooh. But Magisk, oh, I thought he won that. Damn, that would have been a crazy 1v3. Either way, 11-6 down. There's the T-side timeout. And actually, I noticed Falcons were really strong off of their timeouts. This isn't really a metric you're necessarily tracking all the time, but off of those timeouts, I feel like Falcons have been really strong. Unfortunately, this isn't an example of one of those times, because when Maus took mid and Falcons were like off of mid, right? When Falcons gave it up, Maus still most of the time found the entry, or it was just like a 5v5 and Falcons were playing without like someone in middle. But when Maus is giving up middle, they're still managing to find the opening kill, right? And that's just kind of the reality. And I think sometimes a spam like that comes down to just a good feeling for the timing your opponents are going for, but also sometimes it just comes down to getting a little bit lucky. Can we say it comes down to getting a little bit lucky? I feel like it comes down to getting a little bit lucky at times. But 12-6 down, and Falcons do actually make a game of this to some extent. Niko with the awareness to cover the flank. He doesn't really necessarily participate in this round that much. Other than that, they got out A. He wasn't leading. He was throwing some utility from the back. He had a deagle. I think his teammates had a few, they had the AK. They had a few Galils to play the game out. Niko in good position because the molly ends up missing, so we can get ahead of that. And when you know you're ahead of a piece of utility that your opponents think is covering your angle, it's generally probably a pretty good rule to say that getting ahead of it is usually a good idea. However, the reality of this situation is Falcons have lost the mid-control battle, and I think they're kind of accepting that so far. And so they just kind of, when you lose the mid-control battle, one of the things you can do to try and get back into the game, change up the pacing a little bit and make your opponents scared of the extremities. Make them overstack towards A, make them overstack towards B, so then they have to give some ground in middle, and then you can take mid on later rounds, right? So either you can just win with your mid-control the way Maus won against Falcons on their T side, or you can try and pressure the extremities so they have to play back off of mid. Well, I mean, this is just generally a rule for most maps, right? Mirage, this is true on. Most maps this can be true on to varying degrees, right? But you can play the extremities. But the problem is you're at a disadvantage. You're starting from a disadvantage when you do that type of thing. And the funny thing with this here is that Dagster actually misses a smoke. So Dagster's smoke bounces off the wall, bounces back. And you actually have Niko here that I think he hears Brawlin. And Brawlin wants to come around this corner. I think Brawlin was going to come around this corner until that smoke landed, and then he actually decided to bail on that. But it's kind of funny because Niko would have had the jump probably on Brawlin if that smoke hadn't been whiffed. Instead, Brawlin just cancels, and they end up with another round win for Falcons. 12-8. The problem is when you start this from 12-6, or 12-6, I believe it was, you're not giving yourself a lot of space to work with. Now, obviously, if we watched Astralis versus Maus, it is very possible to come back from 12-6 down, but not the easiest. Not the easiest, I think we have to admit. And definitely not the easiest if Niko's in position and he just ends up dying to triple peek from USPs. That was like comedic. Niko's just crouching, uncrouching every once in a while. Crouch, nobody, uncrouch, nobody, crouch, nobody, uncrouch. 3 people. But anyways, Niko is the best spawn for mid. A lot of the times, I think teams are playing this based off of spawn to some extent, where you have X player gets the best spawn for mid, and if that's like your entry or whatever, a lot of the times you're gonna go for fast mid play. Like I think Spirit do this. I haven't looked at the exact spawns, but that's the vibe I got. Like when Donk has this spawn, they're gonna go for the hard swing. Although in this case, Niko has this spawn twice, and I think he goes for this molly nade both times. Tries to spam through, gets instantly spammed back by Jimmy, and that's just kind of, if you're Niko, you die like that, and you're like, wow. That's how this game has been going, hasn't it? Just go for 3 bullet spam, and Jimmy just immediately headshots me. Like, just bang. Like, I just have no chance. And again, because of the situation with the mid control, I think the Falcons were setting up for a B play already. They just had Niko that would have prevented Jimmy being in such good position or so aggressively able to flank if he needed to. But the reality is that they lose him. They were already going for this type of B play, and Maus were just playing off of A. They had 3B, 2A. You're running into a B hit, you're probably not going to have a great chance of winning. And people need to get off this narrative that Niko is like this crazy grand final choker, because I don't think he is. He's not. He's not. He's just not.